So when you look at that, it's not about fame anymore. It's not about eyeballs and ears. This is a game of hearts and minds. You're looking at hearts and minds. You're looking at a community and building a community. So you want to use the podcast as a way to get more business. And what do I mean by that? Interview the people you want to do business with. By and large, that's the number one thing you should be doing.
Why is podcasting a fortune model? Why does Jeffrey Hayzlett insist that business podcasters stop chasing eyeballs and ears and focus on hearts and minds instead? My guest today is Jeffrey Hayzlett. He's the founder of the C-Suite Network. His path to podcasting runs through network TV, radio, and one time he was a Fortune 100 CMO, which is actually how I got to meet him. After noticing more people were watching him online than on traditional TV, he shifted his focus. He launched the C-Suite's podcast network about 10 years ago. Today, he's responsible for close to 800 podcasts, 100 streaming TV shows centered on high-level business audiences. I'm Greg Wasserman, host of this show, Podcast Network Insights. I've spent 15 years of my career in advertising sales, and since 2021, I've been immersed in the podcast ecosystem. As I believe life is about time and relationships, you have no clue where one conversation may lead. I've built a lot of relationships and spent a lot of time with every kind of podcaster, from solo creators just getting started to, like my guest, the heads of podcast networks. If you've ever wondered whether joining a network makes sense, how these networks actually run, other networks you could enjoy joining, whether it's advertising with, partnering with, learning from, my goal for you is to give you a real look behind the scenes so you can confidently navigate whether you host, produce, sponsor, or run a network. As you listen to our conversation, pay close attention to how Jeffrey defines the economics of business podcasting, the operational reasons behind selecting very select episode lengths, and why approaching your show as a pipeline for relationships, not mass downloads, changes the entire calculus for creators and networks alike. And stay tuned after the interview if there's more to the conversation. And no, it's not to get you to subscribe to the show on your favorite platform, but let's be honest, you should probably be doing that if you're listening to this. And no, it's not to encourage you to sign up for my newsletter and discover more podcasts, though you probably should because podcast discovery is incredibly difficult. But with all that said, let's jump into this conversation. The show is called Podcast Network Insights. So, Jeffrey, I always like to start with, when you hear the word podcast network, what comes to mind?
C-Suite Radio and C-Suite TV, because that's what we're building. So we're building what we consider the world's largest business media network. But when you think of network, it means distribution. It means broadcast in some way, shape, or form to an audience that wants to hear it.
Interesting. So you've added in the broadcast side of it. And that goes to, I would have to imagine, your background with the radio component, and creating media. Is that where the brain goes?
Well, and television. If you look at, most people would say podcast, they don't know the difference between audio and video. So traditionally, when I started back at CBS Radio and we did Play.it, which was the very, very first podcast media network ever launched, and I was one of the primaries in that particular endeavor. Then it was just audio, and now, of course, when you turn on, people refer to podcasts. They refer to it also as video. I would still say that's television, but a lot of other people still aren't as educated about it. But typically, broadcast you would think more is television, and then of course podcast is, of course, audio.
So you bring up the old days. So, we've originally first met when you were a speaker in a past life. Then I sold your podcast at Play.it, CBS
there you go.
There. So remember those days. There you go, right? So you've seen the progression of media. What made you decide then to start? Because I remember trying to sell your podcast at the point when we were at CBS. What made you decide to create your own network and where you've taken your network now, which is far different than what CBS was doing then?
Yeah, a lot different. I remember when they shut it down and I said, hey, I'll take those. If you're not going to do anything, I'll take them. We can cover that later. But, to get to your question, I was, the CMO of Kodak, and I was doing so much television way back then that Forbes magazine put me on the front cover. Forbes or Fortune, I can't remember. One of the magazines put me on the front cover of the magazine and said Celebrity CMO. And from leaving that, I went and did 4 seasons on Donald Trump's, Celebrity Apprentice as a judge. I did that. And then went on to create my own show on Bloomberg. And one day, here I am. I'm running the #1 business show on television, prime time. Now, you got to think about that, prime time, because when was the last time anyone rushed home to watch a prime time business show? Especially on cable. And here we are, we were doing the #1 show, but one day I looked at the numbers, and being a business person, because I own the show as well, along with Bloomberg, I said there are more people watching me on television than are watching me online than are watching me on television. So, at some point I turned down to Mike Bloomberg, who was 2 desks down, and said, "Hey, Mike, we should really do this digital TV thing." And he goes, "Not interested." I said, "Well, I want to go do it." And so that's how we got started. So we started C-Suite TV. We ran that for a couple of years. And I like to tell people in the early days of OTT, which is over-the-top television, I said the best way to start a small fortune or make a small fortune in OTT was to start with a large one, because it was cutting edge, it was bleeding edge, and we lost, quite frankly, we lost our ass for a long time. And then CBS called me, and your boss called and said, "Hey, Jeff, we want you to be the anchor." Back then, you remember, it was 4 pillars. Boomer Esiason had sports. Jennifer Beal had health and beauty. Carson Daly had pop, and then I was the business guy. And then they recruited shows underneath each one of those, and we took it to market, launched it at CBS. And this was, I think, January of 2015 was the date, a little over 10 years ago.
Sounds about right.
January, yeah. And then we launched it and, brought on all these shows.
But you went from TV to podcasting then.
Exactly. And now we're coming back around again, because we've got over 700-800 shows on the podcast side, TV side about 100. And by the end of this year, probably have about 2,000 business shows in our network.
So speak to the network. C-Suite Network is what? It is who is the right person that is joining C-Suite Network? Is it just CMOs like yourself? Are they C-level executives at Fortune 500 companies? Like, who have you found is joining the C-Suite?
Yeah, from Main Street to Wall Street, regardless of what size of your company, we're appealing to those people who are vice president or higher. We're a trusted network for people to come together, take their content primarily, using content in order to scale their business. So it's a trusted network where everybody has to be this tall to get in. You have to be a VP or higher to get in, regardless of the size of company, whether you're on, because there's no difference, Greg, which, Wall Street to Main Street, So if you're on Wall Street running a business, the only difference between you and a business in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where I'm from, on Main Street, is just the numbers of zeros behind the numbers. It's the same stuff, same people, same products, same solutions, same, places you can go get all the raw materials or whatever you want to do in terms of whatever your business is. And so that's what we're there. We're there serving those people.
And so I know we've talked, there's a production side to it, but not everyone in part of the network is being produced by you guys.
No, not at all.
So,
yeah.
Right. So the different arms of C-Suite is production, TV, distribution. Walk me through the different arms.
Well, promotion, you got to have promotion too, so you need to be able to have that. With us, there's a little bit of education, motivation, inspiration, and of course monetization. So there's a little bit of all those things that are part of it, because how are you using your podcast? What's the way you're using the podcast? Most people want fame. You're not going to get fame in a business podcast. All right, let's just be very clear. The average business podcast does 2,500 downloads in a month. So when you look at that, it's not about fame anymore. It's not about eyeballs and ears. This is a game of hearts and minds. And, when I was at Kodak, I would spend $17 billion in marketing spend to get people into a funnel to eventually get them into a pipeline. Well, now with the way that Rich is in the niches, you're really looking at the pipeline. You're looking at at hearts and minds. You're looking at a community and building a community. So you want to use the podcast as a way to get more business. And what do I mean by that? Interview the people you want to do business with. By and large, that's the number one thing you should be doing. And if I told you that if you did 50 podcasts over a year, let's say you did one every week, taking off 2 weeks for your holidays or whatever, and you did 50 a week or a year, and from that, you were able to sell, I don't know, 10, 15, 20, we've seen as high as 35% of people sell people on their shows. Meaning they bring them on the shows, they see how smart they are, they see how articulate they are, they see that they stand for values or something, and maybe they're even eye candy. Who knows, But they find some value in that interview that they say, hey, I would like to talk to you about more. What a great way to do it. Because a vast majority of podcasters who are doing business podcasts today are coaches and trainers and authors and speakers. They're thought leaders. Now, there are businesses that do it in our network itself. We have the New York Stock Exchange. We have Society of HR Management. We have all kinds of different groups that bring credibility and content to our network, and we're a distribution arm for that.
And this is what I love about what you guys do is, that's exactly what I coach people. Your 50 number is exactly what I tell people from stages. I'm like, look, if I could bring in 50 people and be able to sell to those, that's relationship right there, as opposed to, I don't care who listens, give me the 50 people and build a relationship that I never would have been able to get them in the first place.
And amen. And again, why would you want to spend all that money and time irritating people who don't want to hear you or listen to you or watch you? So, again, go into it with the game plan that it's a fortune model, not a fame model. And if you follow a fortune model, you're going to get the business that you want. You're going to get the leverage that you want. You're going to gain the thought leadership that you need to position yourself as the go-to person. And quite frankly, you'll get the fame for free. Now, and if you don't, you'll make enough money. And if that's what you want, you can buy it. So, that's the way you want to kind of go at that. And that's the method that we try to teach. Now, there are some shows that we do work with that they are more not fame, but they are reaching a great number of people. As I said, the average business podcast is 2,500 a month. Now, some do 2,500 a week. Some do 100,000 a week. It just depends on the reach and the depth of your content, and quite frankly, sometimes a little bit of luck as well. You never know, because some of those people showed up early. Joe Rogan, love Joe Rogan, but he's nothing pretty to look at. Okay. So, but he got lucky early on and got where he was at. He got the hook, and everybody, grabbed a hold of it and took it. Awesome for him. And he's been able to make a great living from it and a great positioning for the thing. Jason and a bunch of others, I can name a whole bunch of them, have done really well. It's not an easy business for some people. You got to think about this. 38% of podcasts fail before the 10th episode. And of those that are left,
I'd argue it's even higher, but yeah.
It could very well be higher. But of those that are left, 48% of them never make it past the first year. So there's a high failure rate. So one of the things that we do, Greg, is we work with people pretty clearly that says, look, we don't want to waste your time. Don't waste ours. So if you're going to bring a show to our network for distribution and we're going to, make you a thought leader in the category that you're in, then you better make a commitment to at least be there for a year. And that's one of the things that we asked them. And again, you made that comment a little bit earlier. We don't necessarily do the production because the model is very simple. The model, quite frankly, is do it yourself, do it with someone, or have someone do it for you. Get a showrunner, a full producer, that can either help you part way, or you can, like really with podcasts, you could do all of this yourself. I don't recommend that because you got a heart problem, go to a cardiologist, not a general practitioner. You got a podcast issue, get a great, get somebody like Doug or somebody who's doing a great job producing. He's telling us what to do. Beforehand, he was irritating me because he's saying, move over here, raise the camera, do that. Nonetheless, he's giving me a thumbs up right now. But that's what good producers do. Just like when I'm on my show and I've got my earpiece and I shoot live from the New York Stock Exchange, the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, my producer's telling me to ask this, do this, hey, don't touch your nose anymore, whatever, all those kind of things. So the models are fairly easy to do. You just got to decide what's best for you or your budget, But, when I started way back, Craig, you remember this. I started back with CBS. I had a suitcase full of equipment. And I remember that we had and this was just audio. And I had these recorders and microphones and heavy cords and stuff. And I had this big Pelican briefcase of stuff. And it was about 6,000, maybe 8,000 just of sound equipment. And this wasn't video or anything else. Well, if you think about it today, you can get and fully outfit an entire podcast studio for about $700-800 today. And even the camera that we're using right now, which is a 4K camera, which I have right here in front of me. That camera, when I was at Bloomberg, cost me $10,000 to $20,000 a day to rent. And now it's $78 on Amazon. So, the way to get into these is so much easier and so much quicker and just inexpensive to do that you can really make a great show. And this becomes great show. This is now television, because over COVID, we learned, and so did the big networks, learn how to turn this and you right next to it into a television show. So now you got video as well as audio. Now the key, don't forget, is the time frame, because a lot of people shoot time frame in, I'll shoot whatever I like. It's always short form or it's long form. Well, I tell everybody the magic number is 24 and 48, because that's the time in which if you take a half-hour TV show, it's 2 minutes commercials, 8 minutes content, 2 minutes commercials, 8 minutes content, 2 minutes commercial, 8 minutes content, and then it starts all over again. So if you want a half-hour show, it's really 24 minutes, and if you want a full-hour show, it's 48. And if you do that, then we can now take your content, we can put it on our network for podcasts, and then we can put it on our network for streaming. And now we can stream the video and stream and then run with the podcast. So it's great.
And there you go. Everyone has to listen to that, because, truth be told, I just record and I'm like, all right, we'll go for however long. For me, it's more the information, the conversation. But you're like, no, there is a rhyme and reason. There is a actual format, and you can't be 25 minutes because I need that ad commercial to be in there. So someone that's joining the C-Suite network is, hey, here's the rules, here's the framework, here's what you're doing. So if I want to join your network, what are the things I'm looking for? What are you looking for in me as a besides a VP level or above?
Well, we're looking for great content. That's number one. And then we are looking for content that we can step and repeat. So again, you can shoot whatever you want. You can film it in whatever. It's your podcast. It's your IP. You will own it. It's your show. Do whatever you want as long as it's appropriate, right? But if you want to make sure that content is heard and seen by more people, then pay attention to the stats that I gave you a few minutes ago. Because the average podcast is 25 minutes, period. But if you do 25 minutes, it's not going to hit the streaming channels because they're built for 24. It's not going to hit the broadcast because they're positioned for 24 or 48. So you want to know, if I want to still be seen on the tube, then of course I want to be at that 24 or 48. So you just want to kind of keep those things in mind in segment times that could be used in a roll up or a roundup channel that you could be able to get it. So we're looking for any kind of content that's interesting, that's thought-provoking. Certainly that's yours and your kind of opinion, meaning your own IP. We want that. And then also that's educational, motivational, inspirational. And then it's also about, business. So business can also include lifestyle. It can include travel. It can include, we have divorce shows. That's one of our big ones, quite frankly, is a divorce show.
I wouldn't think that's business, but yeah.
There are a lot of business people who get divorces. So, we want to help the business people. So it's about that. And there's shows about your families. There's shows, again, about travel, about food, luxury. We love those lifestyle and luxury shows as well. In fact, you're going to see us launch a travel channel. You'll see us with like a New York Stock Exchange channel and maybe a SHRM or work channel and some other channels that we'll build out in addition to leadership. So just like when you turn on the TV and you see our Netflix or Apple TV and you see drama, you see Westerns, you see romance, you're going to see leadership, finance, maybe crypto or some other show or channels that will be out there.
So if we think about your background, where you've come, not only is what you've described, working for doing your show on Bloomberg, but like your unique entertainment mindset and how you're thinking about TV and streaming and fast channels. If someone here was listening to this and going, ooh, how do I do that with my network? Is it possible? Is it just because you've been in this space that you've been able to do it and someone else can't replicate it? Or is that easy to replicate this day and age?
You can replicate it. I wouldn't say it's easy, and I wouldn't say it's inexpensive either. So it's not something that you could just start up overnight. And then, of course, are you credible? Do you have the chops for it? I think that's an interesting piece too. We have quite a diversity of content that we're getting, and of course, getting some what you would call prime time shows. And so we'll have headliners and prime time shows. So we're getting a lot of great talent now because some of that's changing, meaning some people are moving away from the traditional, so they're coming over to this new media, and they love the platform. And you want to be able to, I think, whoever's doing this, whether it's yourself, myself, or any executive, you want to monetize the brand of you. And I think that's important as well. But to start it up, yeah, you could start it. Anybody could, go do it. It's not for the, weak at heart. It takes a deep pocket to be able to do it right. The investments are fairly heavy. And of course, the learning curve is freaking expensive. So you better be ready, to get ready for that too. But, it's certainly doable. Even knowing what we know, we're still raising millions of dollars. We're spending millions of dollars to be able to do what we want to do, the way we want to do it. And, it's not easy. It's not easy to do that.
And I think that also, if I look at the conversations we've had, you and I, but also just others in the network space, how you're approaching, as you just said, we're investing millions of dollars. I can't say how many networks I've spoken to are investing millions of dollars in the infrastructure, in the distribution that you are, which also I think separates you in some regards to other networks out there. Wouldn't you agree?
Thank you, Greg. I do agree with that. And the other piece of it is also the credibility. I mean, we've got a credible group. The C-Suite Network's got 350,000 people that are part of the network. Word of mouth amongst us is some of the best there is. Most of our business, most of our shows come in by word of mouth. I got 2 or 3 that came in today, on average, adding 6 to 9 shows a day. So we're, within the next couple of months, we'll have 194 new shows. We have over 150,000 in our pipeline right now that we're looking at. Again, that takes resources to do. That takes time to do. It's not an easy thing to do. And the people on the other side, quite frankly, that we're talking to are savvy business people, because they should be, because they're on our network. So they're asking the right kinds of questions. And of course, what do they want? They want somebody that they can trust. They want somebody who's been there and done that. When you're at this level of business, the last thing you need is advice. Nobody wants advice. Advice is given by people who have never done it. Okay? That's what advice is. Counsel is what you want. You want someone who's been there and done that. And, I do my own show today, live from the New York Stock Exchange every single week. And I've been there. I was doing podcasts when even Danny Bonaducci from the Partridge Family was doing it. I remember I met him, when back in 2015, and others that were there and doing it and pioneering. I remember CBS running ads on my show, on 60 Minutes. It was amazing. So we've been there at those times, and then, but at the same time, I've, acted as my own grip on my own show, hauling, the stuff around, to get from one shot to another. And that's the stuff you have to know. Or, turned on the camera myself, done the lights myself, set up the studio, paint the studios myself. Do all the things you have to do as well, when you're an entrepreneur. And I'm just ecstatic and happy to do that too.
I think that another thing of a person that's looking to join your network or separate, the values, it's like, are you willing to roll up your sleeves, right? Because I have to imagine CEOs that have run companies, at some point they had to roll up their sleeves. Are they willing to go ahead and go hey, we're now doing a new medium. This is a completely different business. That's part of the business you're building. Are you willing to do that? or you could hire someone to do it, but you still need to show up and do good content.
Well, and
right?
you got to know, and in this business now, you got to know a little bit about what you're doing and how it's supposed to be done, so that when I'm having conversations like with Doug, your producer, he knows what I'm talking about, and I know what he's talking about. You know what to do and how to do it, and and there's still a lot of people up there, as you well know, Greg, that don't show up on time, don't do the right things, don't have the right mics, don't have the right lighting. I can't tell you the number of times. I mean, I know you do a good job with your show. You've studied, you've done your homework, you got your intros, your outros, outtakes on the back end side of it. There's people that show up. I've shown up at podcasts and they said, Jeff, tell me about yourself. It's like, what? Did you look at and I always like to tell them I was born a poor black man in Alaska. And they look at me like, well, you're not black. Well, you didn't do your homework. Of course I'm not. There you go.
Have some fun. This is true. But it goes to, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'll let you do the quote, but something about content is king, but context is.
Content is king. Activation is queen, but context is the kingdom. And that, what I mean by that, and what I've said by that, then people have been quoting this all over the industry, because you can create great content, right? And you can do a great job at getting it out there, but if it's not in the context of what people want and need, it's just garbage. It's just stuff. And, we see a lot of people that do a lot of things that I just think are what a waste of time and money. And then I hear lots of gems out there. I mean, really good content, but nobody's listening or nobody's watching. And I think that's why networks are so doggone important to people, because if you're out there by yourself and you've got great content, you're in podcast purgatory. And there's 1.6 million business podcasts out there today. That's a lot. Now there's going to be 10 times that before it's done. There's going to be millions of television channels, the way we've described television or whatever you want. There's going to be lots of channels. I'm telling you, numbers are going to go down. It's going to be riches in the niches, but you've got to be discovered. So context is the kingdom.
So to that point, you believe not only what you're building, but a creator should be joining a network, whether it's yours and it's the right fit, or any network for that matter, and start somewhere and then graduate to yours based on just the business models of different networks.
It's no different than AI. Let's look at AI, because that's the big term. I mean, most people couldn't spell AI 5 years ago, so now everybody's in it. Everybody's an expert, But the key thing that I want to say about that is we all thought it would be like a SaaS tool. And we would find one AI, and that one AI would take care of everything for it. But now, I was listening to Mark Cuban the other day, and he said he had 35 AI tools on his phone. What? That means he's paying a lot of different money for different tools. Well, my belief is that networks are like that too. So your content needs to be out there in many other places. So a lot of people believe, I'm just going to be on Bloomberg, or I'm just going to be on ABC, or just going to be on that. I've already told you there were more people watching me online than were watching through broadcast. So you want to be online through broadcast, over here, in here, as a blog, and retake the content and put it out on social. There's lots of different ways that you want to take that content to get it out to the right audience, because you and I might watch things a certain way, and then, but your customer or the person you're trying to reach to might want to listen to it another way. So you've got to be able to find those engines. You don't just put it on the main 6 podcasts. You put it on 1,900 engines out there. And you could be trending in Kathmandu and do better job than you are in Iowa.
That's what I say. It's like if everyone just focuses on the top 2, Apple and Spotify, and you forget about all the other distribution, like my background was at Player FM, and it's like there's 2 million people, but if you aggregate all of them, that becomes 30% of the market. Why wouldn't you want all those free people? Because you have no clue who's going to consume it, how they're going to consume it. So I'm 100% agreeing with you on that piece.
Let's take, a lot of people will say, hey, I need to get it on YouTube. Well, I tell most people YouTube's where business videos go to not be watched, because people aren't watching that. They are watching some business there. There's no doubt about it. Okay. There's some great content providers, but by and large, the majority of the content that's being created is not being watched there. So you've got to go where your customers are. You've got to go where your audience is. A good example is, I'll put together a video and put it on YouTube, and I won't do as well there because my people aren't watching there. They're watching on their laptop, but they're watching it business, and they're watching it from this time into this time. We've got all the stats. I know what they're watching on and when they're watching and so forth, and how long they watch and which device they watch on. We watch all that stuff. But, if I were to put it on YouTube, people wouldn't see it. But if I put it on X, within the first 10 minutes, I get 10 to 20,000 views on X. Well, that's where I've curated a large audience for a long time. And, I was one of the first 1,000 people that were on Twitter. Well, I'm lucky with that, right? But if I put it on another social media platform, not so good, like TikTok. I can't even spell it, so I'm not on it, okay? In Instagram, I'm slowly, growing my thing, which is fine. I want to be wherever my people are that want to consume and watch or listen to my content.
I mean, you've been doing it, as you said, for a while. So you had the X Twitter feed back then. Instagram, you weren't. So if a new person was starting today, go where their audience is and start building there as opposed to building it on everywhere.
Yeah, and then what I also like, not being on a rented platform as much as possible. I want to build my own channel, my own community. I want to build up, the things around me to be able to be as supportive of that community as possible. So there's some other techniques that you might want to develop. These are things that we're building out so that all your content is available there. They can see that. They can eventually buy from you. They could get courses from you. They could get products from you. They could sign up for extra subscriptions from you, if that's the case, for insider information and so forth that you might want to provide. These are the things you're going to have to start thinking about, because again, television's going to change, video's going to change, audio's going to change. And by the way, it is one of the most personal media out there. I mean, you think about your phone. I'm sitting here looking at it right here. The most personal device in the history of the world is this device. You know where your phone is more than you know where your children are. And you think about this. Lose your children and your phone in the mall at the same time. Which one do you go looking for first? Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm telling you, it's the phone. So in this particular device, you have to think about how you build content for that. And then if we think about the audio side, you have to really be concerned with sound. You're inside of someone's ears. They're listening in those ear pods or AirPods or whatever, and they're paying attention to you. So you've got to do a good job of giving them, the best that you've got to offer.
So what is one way? You've talked about community, and I've looked at other networks and how they've described community. When you look at community with inside the C-suite, is it each show's its own individual? Are you bringing the shows together so they meet and they talk to each other and so there's collaboration, especially as you grow? Like, what does the network look like from a community
standpoint? We run a contributors community. You want to think of it like a media or content community where we get all of our folks together on a regular basis. Now, we haven't done as good as I would have liked, and going forward, that's one of the big things that I've talked to our team to make sure that we do a better job of bringing these curators and creators together, and so that we can work together to be able to be the best that we can be at what we do. And so that's trading tips and tricks and insights and processes and ways to do things and how to do it and what software is better to do the editing with or distribution, all of the things that are important. So that's an important thing. At the same time, look at the statistics and things of how to better serve your audience and who that is. And then, of course, how we're growing that audience for those particular creators, those thought leaders, the content providers that we're aggregating and pulling together. So I think that's important to look at that both. Years ago, I was partners with Sheldon Adelson. Sheldon was one of the richest men in the world. He passed during a couple of years ago. He owned the Venetian. Prior to that, he owned the not consumer electronics show. He owned Comdex. And I once asked him, because I worked with him on his tech investments, I once asked him, Comdex, you probably don't remember, Greg. You probably weren't even born by then. But anyway, it was the precursor to the Consumer Electronics Show, which I'm sure you've heard.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
So it was just as big, or if not bigger. In fact, the convention center was built by Sheldon because he had it at the Sands Convention Center, and CES is still held there. Okay. And at the convention center, he built the convention center and sold it to the city for $1. So he had a bigger place to put all of his exhibits and all the things that he was selling at that show. Well, I once asked him, I said, Sheldon, what makes a great trade show like the Comdex, and he said, Jeffrey, he said, attendees beget exhibitors, exhibitors beget attendees. And so the same thing holds true with a podcast or a show, a television show. A great show gets great viewers or listeners, and great listeners and viewers get great shows. And so you have to have that reciprocal. So bringing people together to help educate them on what they could do and how they could do it better is very critical for, our community. And we're serving the C-suite. We're serving one of the most elite bodies of business people. And if you think, I was a Fortune 100 officer, there's only 100 companies, 5 officers per company. It's only, it's not a lot of people that are there. And if you think of Fortune 1000 companies, there are more people playing professional football than there are Fortune 1000 officers. So it's an elite community. And so when we think about the greatest, weapon that this country has, it's the free enterprise system, and it's our way of life and business. And so this is a very important community, and we're serving that community, and we take it very serious.
So from a cost standpoint or an investment for them to join the community, it's free to join, and then it's a rev share in terms of you take either a percentage of their ad sponsored dollars that you're bringing in, the distribution, or what does the money look like from that?
No, shame on you for even talking about a model like that. I mean, no, our model is so it's pretty straightforward. We charge someone right now $2,500 to come and join our network, and you get all the benefits of that. And someone said, is that a week? And I go, no, that's a year. So we used to charge a lot more than that, but we do charge $2,500 at this present time. When somebody's watching or listening, might be different. But and we make our money from the aggregation of the advertising, because most shows at a $4 or $7. Now we get a high CPM because we're a very elite group, meaning these are high affluent people, one of the most affluent in the world. That's our audience. Of small businesses to big businesses, those officers that are listening are those people that are in business. When you think about it, they have money, and so they're good buyers. And so we typically will see a $25 or $50 CPM, where the major portion of the market might be seeing $2 or $4, maybe as high as $7 CPM. So if you have 2,500 people and you're doing a $7 CPM, you're not making much money. In fact, you would call me and say, Jeff, how much did I make? And I would have to tell you, good news, you made something. Bad news is we're going to, bad news is we're going to lunch on it, and you should bring a coupon, right? So by and large, the riches aren't there for them on that. That's why you monetize the podcast with sponsorships and integrated partnerships, and with interviewing people you want to do business with, driving the business of you. And by driving that business of you, that's how you monetize it. I monetize it by aggregating it. And, there's a price to pay to get on that network. If I want to go on Bloomberg, do you think Bloomberg's going to put my show on for free? No. They're going to want to see a dollar return. Is CBS going to put my show on there for free? Heck no. They're going to look at it, and only a few shows get through to those kinds of networks, and they got to generate millions of dollars in order to be able to be on those kinds of networks. And I know that because I used to be on those networks. So I know how the business works. And so what we're doing is we're going out to a wider audience and building and, scorched earth, as many people as we can get that have great content, putting them together. But you're going to pay to get on as part of that because of the investment we've already made. You get the benefit of that, and we should be able to recoup some of that as well.
So the business model for me, if I want to join, if I'm listening to this going like, is C-suite the right fit for me? Do you believe are you willing to invest the $2,500 so I can get access to the massive audience that the C-suite's putting you on, the distribution channels, and of course the money you'll get back, not from sponsors and ads, but the money you'll get back to your business through that exposure?
Yeah, and by the way, how can I could monetize that, but how do I know that? How do I keep track of it? I don't even want to put an accounting person on that to try to figure that out. And it just doesn't make sense. But the other thing I try to do is, someone said, what makes a great show? And I said, those that pay. And what I meant by that, those that are willing to invest in themselves to get the return that they want, based on their own IP and their own content. if you're not willing to pay $2,500 for access to get on a major network, I'm not interested in talking to you. I can tell you that, right? Don't bother calling me. Don't bother emailing me, and it's not to be elitist. It's not to be braggadocious, because it's not bragging when it's true. We deliver, and we have over 100 million downloads. We deliver. So I know what we're doing. So I want you to do it. I talked to somebody the other day and they said, why do I want to be on your network? I said, I haven't asked you to yet. So, let's be clear.
This is true, but no, it's the hobbyist versus the person who's willing to invest. And you're like, look, goes back to, if you're going to do 50 episodes a month and know that you're going to be able to convert, as you said, statistically 35% of those people into actually sales, what's that worth to you? So isn't having $2,500 invested into your network worth getting that extra opportunity for more people to get the exposure? Otherwise, you're doing it by yourself.
As I sit down with one company today, they know where they're going. They're raising millions. They know how to do it. They have to position themselves as being the thought leader of their category. They're going to use a show to do that. Used to do that with SEO and ad spend and Google words and all the other stuff. That's a lot of money to do that. And now they're switching over to content, and they're becoming the de facto standard, for that particular industry. So they'll be up on the pedestal and build that content. And now you have to, in order with everything AI and GEO, you've got to really generate a lot of content. Every company has to be a media company. So get over yourself. What's the easiest way to do that? Quite frankly, it's podcasting, and now with a little video. Greg, you've been evangelizing this for a while, and you're spot on. This is the way to do it. And it's easy. It's easier. Okay. And it's a visual as well as an auditory kind of thing, which I love both of those. And you can turn all of these conversations into a blog, into a book. You can turn the interviews into a compilation at the end of the year. You can take the best quotes from every episode and put them together in a roundup for the year. I mean, there's all kinds of way to skin this thing. And every day I learn new things all the time of things that I didn't know about from other people, which I think is important to be a part of the network and the community, because I'm learning from you. I'm watching that and I go, oh, I like what Doug is doing there. I like what he's telling him. And maybe I should use that, and that's the kind of things that we're seeing all the time.
You bring up books, and correct me if I remember our previous conversation, but you also are going down the publishing arm.
Yeah.
It's ultimately, how do we create these different verticals that we know will serve for? So you've got your TV channels, you've got your podcast channels, but you're creating the C-suite is as a network, as you said, is a media company. What are the different arms that you are helping? I guess we'll call them, instead of creators, they're businesses, helping your businesses grow their business.
You mentioned books. So Wall Street Journal last year got out of the book business, meaning saying bestsellers. So we created the C-suite bestseller list, because how do you become a bestseller? Okay, there's two ways. One way is you sell the definition 25,000 book over its lifetime. That's it. Now, when the average business book might be selling 2,000 books in its lifetime, 25,000 is pretty big. My last book I pre-sold 220,000 copies before it even went to print. So you can, there's different levels of what that is. Now, the second way to become a bestseller is someone says that you are. That's it. And who determines that? New York Times, USA Today, used to be the Wall Street Journal. Well, why not the C-suite network? So we put criteria around that, and now we're giving people credibility, and that's what you want to do. So yeah, books. How about blogs? Blogs are still a big business, and still a great way for people to get information. But you've got to create content. What a great way to be able to create content is do a podcast and television show. Take those clips. Now you got short clips you can activate for the week. You can turn this interview into what are the 10 best things that Greg and Jeff said during the interview about podcasting. That becomes a blog. And with AI tools, you can actually have it listen to it, write it for you, and say, I only want it in so many words. And then the compilation book, I can, all kinds of different things that I could do, with this particular genre.
what are the other business lines? Because I know you've got C-suite.
Yeah, we've got podcasts, we've got television shows, we've got the books themselves, the blogs, so you can be a C-suite network advisor, so that you can write for us and become an expert. And on top of it, we got memberships, so different levels that you can participate in our organization, either as an executive member, a contributor, like we've just said, or in one of the many communities that we have, like Women's Coaches Council, Manufacturing Council, Finance Council, Tax Council. You can think about every kind of role, city, industry, size, that you can have, and problem that needs to be solved. And there's typically a council around it, and that's part of the C-suite. So think of us like a giant sequoia tree with all these different branches of all these different communities, but underneath it, this huge canopy with a lush ecosystem, and that's what we are. And then the third pillar is really about our marketplace: C-suite loans, C-suite legal, C-suite business valuations, C-suite research, C-suite investments, C-suite, everything. I'm even going to do C-suite cologne, the smell of success.
Is that only because you worked with Donald and he already had
Did he have a cologne? Did Trump have a cologne? Well, this one will be for people who are on the left and the right. Okay, we'll be right there.
There you go.
Your red states and blue states, they love that. They'll love this cologne. We might even do steaks. We should do. I know we did steaks, so we should do instead of the Trump states, we got to do C-suite steaks. There you go. They sizzle. They sizzle louder or something like that.
So we go back to Bloomberg, your media. What is one thing that, from an advertising standpoint, right? Like my background selling your show, like what is it that, and we could even joke about what I struggled selling your show back then. But what is it from an advertising standpoint? Because I think of those that are listening to this, like what do they get wrong about the value of a network or what you're doing from a network standpoint?
Well, that's a good point. I think the benefits of it is they get the access to that particular, the mindset of those executives, right? So they're in one of the most intimate kinds of media there is, and that's being the podcast and television side. So they get that reach. So you get greater reach, discovery, and you get really good conversion, because the person that's doing the interviews, the folks that are the host, or the transference of that is really good. You can get very innovative as well. You can do live read-ins. You can product placement on the show, talk about the show. One of my big sponsors for years has been Dunkin' Donuts. America lives on Dunkin', and
runs on donuts.
Well, America lives on Dunkin', and so does All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett. And so, and I would take a break, and one of the things that I did was I would ask my guest, how does he or she love their coffee? And that became a conversation that we would do. And I would take that clip of whoever that guest was and then provide that to Dunkin' when they would send that out to all their employees. They'd send that out to all the owners, and they would post it on social media, where I talked to, say, Penn Jillette. Penn Jillette's a great example. Good friend of mine, Penn and Teller. And I said one time, how do you take your coffee? And he said, Jeff, he goes, I don't drink coffee. I don't do any caffeine. I said, Penn, of all the people I know in this world, doing mind-altering substances I would think be at the top of your list. I said, you wear black fingernail polish, and you're 6'8", you're a massive guy. You need coffee just to run that big engine of you. And he goes, no, Jeff, I never liked caffeine, but one time someone gave me a decaf coffee from Dunkin' and I really liked it. So he saved me on that one. But, and then you got guys like Steve Forbes who, I say, Steve, how do you take your coffee? He goes, Jeff, you're not going to believe this, but every day I stop at the Paterson, New Jersey train station at the Dunkin' Donut, and I get a glazed donut and a cup of coffee, black. And I eat my donut and drink my coffee on the way in from New Jersey. And those are the kind of cool things that are transference, that you're able to get. And so that's great for advertisers and great product integration. I have a Scotch company. I'm a big drinker of Scotch. I've had, again, we talked about, I did another interview earlier. They were trying to get me because I was wearing an Orvis shirt. They said, you got to, rep their luggage. Well, I've repped Toomey luggage because I love Toomey luggage. And I love brands that I like. United Airlines has been one of mine, big sponsors over the years. And of course, I've had the shows that my shows have played on United Airlines for years.
Here you go. Well, I know you've talked about your books, and I always love to look at, books that have impacted people's lives. So besides your own, is there a book that you would recommend to people that you think they should be picking up and reading?
I love all the classics. I really, truly do. I love, Think and Grow Rich. I love books like How to Win Friends and Influence People. These are books that I read every single year again and again. Og Mandino, The Salesman, that's a great book. These are some of the classics that are out there. But I love to read contemporary new books today on what's going on in business. Michael Lewis is a great writer. He's done a number of great books in different genres, everything from Moneyball, to I think Barbarians at the Gate, one of the very first business books I read. But I love to read biographies of business people as well. I think that you get a lot of great insight on what happened, in there. Like I can remember Lee Iacocca's book. You won't even know who we're talking about, but he was an executive at Chrysler. And before that, he worked for Henry Ford at Ford Motor Company. And he was going to have the president, CEO, Henry Ford, the son of the founder of the company, going to come over to his house on a Sunday for a cookout. And so he knew that Henry Ford said that the best burger he ever ate in his entire life was in the executive dining room of Ford Motor Company. Back then they had executive dining rooms and then dining rooms for the rest of the workers and everybody else. And so Lee Iacocca went up to the executive dining room, went to the executive cook and said, "Hey, tell me about the hamburger. What do you do? I've got the boss coming over my place on Sunday and I want to know how to make that hamburger." So the chef went over to the refrigerator, took out an aged filet mignon, put it into a meat grinder, grinded it up, and made this beautiful hamburger out of filet mignon. Well, of course, that's like a Wagyu burger today. So that, you get insights like that of the things that happen. Or, I can remember another thing in Lee's book that he wrote that, he talks about executives who brag about never taking vacations. And he goes, you got to take time out for yourself. And he goes, the same problems that you had 2 weeks ago will be there when you get back, so, and he's right, it'll still be there.
There you go. I appreciate it. We'll have those in the show notes. One podcast, because podcast discovery is so difficult. What is one podcast you think that people should be listening to?
Oh, I'm not going to give you one. And the reason I say that, I try to listen to a new one every week. And because, I really do. And some of them are nuts. I mean, I'll pick one and I'll listen to it. And and many times I'll go, well, I'll never do that again. But, I want to hear, because of the business I'm in, I want to hear different perspectives and different things. And I'll listen to things that are totally opposite of where I'm at. That's just who I am. So I enjoy those. But Jason, and there's so many others, I think who just do a great job of great content. And I just love to listen to the ones. And the average person, by the way, listens to 5 different shows and 8 episodes a week. So, I try to squeeze 1 or 2 more of those in as wherever possible.
So you didn't give what would be one, or give me some names that you would recommend so I can put them and recommend for other people that.
Well, I think John Lee Dumas does a really good job. He's done a good job.
Okay, Entrepreneurs on Fire.
Joe Rogan, I love to listen to Joe, although sometimes I like to listen to the conspiracy and all the other crackpots that I think he has on the show. Nonetheless, Jason Caladonis, I think, does a really good job. I love to listen. I mentioned him before. They've got a great show, and those are the ones that pop up on top of my head.
Cool. Well, is there anything else that we haven't covered here that, for anyone that would be listening, to understand not only how you've operated C-suite, but also how to think about operating a network?
I would think a lot of people, Greg, because they hear so much about podcasts, they hear so much about television, that it's over. I can't break in. And let me tell you, if podcasts were a human being, I still think we're at that 13, 14-year-old level, and there's a lot to go. And what we're going to see us do is reinvent the media, and it's going to be reinvented. We're calling it new media because that's what it is. And, 10 years ago, I thought it was brand spanking new, and it's nothing like what we see today. And there's a lot more. And the other thing I would really caution people or have people think about is, with all the AI that's out there, how can you be unique and different than everybody else? And that is, be authentic. And I think people are going to be really moving away from that pendulum that's swinging, let's go make it all AI, to being really genuine and human. And I think podcasting is the way to do that.
There you go. Authenticity. I love it. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining me. And thanks for sharing all you could about C-Suite Network on Podcast Network Insights. It's always been a pleasure. And to think our path started, 15 plus years ago at a sales kickoff, and then selling your show, and now having you on my show. And I look forward to many more times.
I can't wait to do it again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, you've made it this far, and I appreciate it. I truly do. Because let's be honest, we know most of us don't make it to the end of an episode. So if you give me a couple extra minutes of your time, allow me to give you my thoughts in this conversation. At the start, I brought up the idea of this fortune model for podcasting. The idea that for business shows, it's not about chasing viral fame, but about creating opportunities for real-world results through thoughtful, strategic interviews. Other things that stood out to me would be, first, how Jeffrey has built C-Suite Network with a clear bar for entry, targeting only VP level and above, across all company sizes. It's not free for all, and that sets a tone for trusted connections. Most networks don't draw that line so sharply. It changes what you're really signing up for. If you want access, or if you want to be around people facing similar stakes. Second thing is the focus on segmenting content for distribution. The idea that your podcast should hit those magic numbers, 24 or 48 minutes, not just whatever length feels right in the moment, like my show, right? Because that's what unlocks bigger reach on streaming and broadcast channels. It's a very different model than what most creators expect. It's practical. Structure your show right, and suddenly your podcast runs as a TV show. And it makes you reconsider what counts as flexibility. Sometimes having rules frees you up for bigger opportunities. Third thing, I didn't expect to hear a straightforward cost structure of $2,500 a year to get on the network, rather than focus on ad shares or back-end splits. It's direct. It pushes you to treat your show as an investment, one that should deliver returns through business growth, not just audience size. That's not how most networks operate, and it flips the mindset around what you're really paying for: access, positioning, and credibility. And the last thing that struck to me was Jeffrey leaning into the integrated TV, podcast, and even blogs and books, all under one roof. It's not about aggregating podcasts, but about creating verticals, publishing, membership councils, even a C-suite bestseller list. Most networks stay in their lane. Audio, maybe video. Here the network functions more like a media conglomerate, pulling creators into a full stack platform. It's a big shift. If you're thinking about the future of your show or your network, it makes you reconsider what scope really means. There's so much more that I enjoyed from this conversation, and I'm sure you have plenty of notes yourself. That's just what I had to share. As always, thank you again for tuning in. To the few people who gave me a 5-star review on Apple, thank you. I've received DMs that you're enjoying the podcast. That really means everything to me. But go ahead, leave a review, and let others know. The show wouldn't be possible with some of the amazing companies that I must say thank you to. The show is produced by the amazing team at Stories and Strategies. If you don't know them, I highly recommend you reach out to them. I'm using RSS.com for my podcast hosting because, let's be honest, podcast hosting is more than storage. RSS.com provides so many features to ensure a great podcast experience, easy to use, maximum distribution, a community to learn from, monetization solutions, and so much more. Systems and processes are key for consistency needed in podcasting, which is why I use Northflow, a dedicated podcast project management built by podcasters for podcasters. And then turning these recordings into hundreds of pieces of content is why I use Cast Magic for the content repurposing, my guest assets, and more. As I say, life is about time and relationships. You have no clue where one conversation is going to take you. This is why I'm able to have these conversations and bring them to you. This is why I love networking. You have no clue where these conversations are going to take you. So your future self is actually thanking you for listening to them. I live on LinkedIn. Reach out. let's talk. To those of you who have already done so, I appreciate you. That alone means this podcast has value and it's creating the conversations I wanted to. As I mentioned, I have a newsletter because podcast discovery is really difficult. So find it on my LinkedIn profile, subscribe, and find out some new podcasts you could be listening to. Speaking of which, subscribe to this podcast wherever you do. New episodes come out every Thursday. Until next time, I appreciate you.